Well, welcome back to Forecast Lab. Yeah, everybody's out in full force shopping. The banks are open, fast food places are busy. Sonic was packed. I don't know if you would call that distancing, social distancing or what, but people are definitely out. But we are seeing a lot more masks out there. That's definitely good news. The other thing I was thinking of when I was editing this was the opening song. Should we start with the very same song every episode, or should we keep changing it? I don't know. You can let me know what you like to see. Here, I'll pop up this poll, and feel free to vote on that. And let's get right into the weather. We're going to try to roll out a few more charts to keep things kind of fresh and interesting. Start with the upper level chart. This is the 250 millibar analysis for this afternoon. Well, it looks like we got a pretty well-defined jet over the southern U.S. Another jet over the U.S.-Canadian border going down into the New York area. So what is this? Is this a polar front jet, subtropical jet? Well, I went ahead and did a cross-section. This runs from about Salt Lake City across New Mexico and then across Texas, and it cuts right into that big jet that's over the New Mexico-Kansas area. Well, I would be inclined to think that this is a subtropical jet. One giveaway is that it's really high up there. It's centered at about 200 millibars. Typically with polar front jets, we see those down at 250, 300, 350. So this right here, this is probably a polar front jet segment over Utah. And I think that's kind of blending into the subtropical jet that's over the Albuquerque, Midland, Lubbock area. And you can see that the base of that subtropical jet is kind of high. It's up at about 400 millibars. Polar front jets, they tend to be a little bit deeper and extend down to 500 millibars. So why that difference? Well, the type of jet that it is can tell me what kind of dynamics are going on. With subtropical jets, I realize that's probably more of an upper front. And yeah, I think I can kind of see that upper front. Maybe right there. It's mostly the mid and upper levels. And then the polar front jet, well, that's kind of off the chart, but that's going to be a little bit more surface-based wherever it is. And looking at the surface chart, I really don't see much temperature gradient. In fact, a lot of that air over the southwestern U.S., that's going to be this continental tropical air mass. And then back over the Pacific area, maritime polar. Let's get that a little bit more centered here. And then, of course, we got the tropical air mass out over Texas. So let's start from west to east. Well, we do see some weather there in California. Cool and cloudy conditions, going back to the upper level chart. That's going to be this upper level low off the California coast right there. That's a cutoff low, and it's detached from the prevailing westerlies over Canada there. So whenever we have cutoff low off the California coast, the weather tends to be kind of cloudy and showery, and right around the periphery we might see a little segment of a polar front jet. So that's what we got going on there in California, upper level low, little Pacific air right along the coast, and looks like maybe some trace of a frontal system in the Colorado River Valley region. You can see north of there we're getting a little bit of that warm front, low cloud, mid cloud, some of that 40s there in Tonopah and Elko. And then going out to the east, you can see things have really warmed up on the plains. Look at that 80s, all the way up to Nebraska and Kansas. Very warm conditions. But we do have a little bit of cyclonic flow. So it looks like kind of a very weak frontal system, and that's what I put here. And I think it's probably in the process of dissipating, and that's why I put these frontalysis lines. We do have a dry line extending southward. Don't think we have the lift or instability for any storms along that dry line, but it is there, dividing these 30s around Childress and Snyder from 60s in eastern Oklahoma and Texas. In the Gulf, it's open. I mean, we got 70s all the way up to Louisiana, but it's very veered. See that wind? It's kind of more out of the west than it is out of the south. So that's going to be kind of a dry pattern that's going to erode what moisture that we do have. And there's the pattern there on the satellite. Texas definitely has kind of an eroded look. A lot of the low clouds are to the right of this line right here. So a lot of the moisture out in this region is going to be kind of shallow. Keep in mind that the dry line is kind of in that area. And even east of that dry line in the tropical air, we're going to have moisture erosion taking place, and that's what's going on in this region right here. So our well-developed cloud field is way out to the east. And up above that looks like some remnants of cirrus associated with that subtropical jet. And that weak frontal system there in Oklahoma, there's barely anything there, just devoid of any low cloud. Well, in the southeast, I'm not really seeing much evidence of any frontal system. That area is completely dominated by that high pressure centered over Florida, so winds there kind of light and variable, kind of maybe like light northeasterly. If I look at the data closely, I can see maybe a little bit of a circulation, kind of like that. So that's indicating the high pressure. It's just northwest of Tampa. So it's given us a little bit of an onshore component there in Louisiana and Mississippi, and bringing that moisture northward. Looks like the Appalachian region also in a transition there, but we got 70s all the way up to Indiana, Ohio, and a few pockets of 50s in the Appalachian region right there. There's how things look in the northeast U.S. I can see a difference between 80s there in Virginia and 60s in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So it looks like the remnants of that front is still right there around the D.C. area, but that should be undergoing frontalysis as that high pressure kind of settles in over that area, and that divergence will break apart those temperature contrasts. In the Great Lakes, we've got a bit of a frontal system going through the Chicago area. Looks like the low pressure is right there around Rockford, dragging this weak cold front through Iowa, and we would expect that kind of move eastward during the day. But overall, it looks like temperatures are really coming up. We're seeing lots of 70s and 60s. About the only cold spot that we see is around the UP of Michigan there. Still lots of 40s hanging on in that area. And there's how things look in the Pacific Northwest for today. Looks like another Alberta Clipper coming out of Canada. This one has a lot less cold air with it. Only 30s back there behind that front. And we did look up in Canada, and we can see the thickness pattern associated with that front. See that right there? Very good thickness packing back there in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So that's the support for that front. There's the other fronts that you saw in the previous charts, kind of like that right there. And then the Pacific front somewhere in there. So the most potent cold front is that one in Canada. Looks like in a bit of an occlusion up there in Manitoba. And no longer do we have that big 1065 millibar high up in northern Canada. It's all the way down to 1020 millibars. So it is really, really weakened, and that should put an end to these cold blasts that we've seen over the past week. What is going to be dominant is this 1030 millibar high in the Pacific. That'll be coming inland right there and pushing some more cold air into the west coast. And then if we go further back into the Gulf of Alaska, very potent frontal system right there. In fact, let's put the fronts on correctly. There we go. There's a big baroclinic system and then an occlusion just north of that. So that should be approaching the Canadian coast here in a few days. So everything looks consistent. Everything makes sense. So let's dive into that forecast. All right, so we know we have a good forecast when we can look at this map and know exactly what's going on. So this is how things look this evening. This matches up really good with our surface analysis. So we're going to be looking at that Alberta Clipper coming south through Montana and Nebraska, probably heading down towards Minnesota and Iowa. And we'll be watching the system off the coast of California, big upper level low off Santa Barbara there, with a front out in the California deserts. We've got this low there in Colorado. That's probably just kind of a lee side low and also a heat trough. Very common this time of year, so that's going to be centered right there. And then we know that there's going to be a dry line somewhere in this region right there. So let's move it forward. Go through overnight into tomorrow. Whoa, look at that cold blast coming out of Nebraska there. Looks like it's picked up a little bit of kick there, triggering some storms there in Illinois. So we're going to have to kind of watch that as far as severe weather potential. A lot of times when we have storms developing along a cold front like this, they do tend to be easily undercut by cold air, which kind of limits the tornado potential. We can't completely rule that out, but we'll see if we can go to the charts and get some more information. Also, that cold blast there in California moving inland. You can see that by that thickness packing right there, and I think the warm front is probably curved back like that. So, yeah, that's going to be it. Upper level low coming on shore there near San Diego. So it's going to be pretty showery there around Las Vegas, Needles, Barstow, and the southern deserts right there. All right, so let's put it together. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then we can see the model GFS there breaking out some showers around College Station down to San Antonio. So we'll check that out. That's probably a little bit more in the tropical realm as far as the skew-ts. Yeah, and we can see that there on the skew-ts. Very little capping, pretty much almost no capping. This is making me think probably a sea breeze. I guess we are getting kind of into a little bit of a summer-like regime, so maybe we got a little incursion coming in like that. And then the storms in Illinois, let's look at those. Get a proximity sounding on that. Well, the moisture does kind of taper off there off the surface. That's going to be one problem. But the photograph looks pretty good. Some decent 0th 1 kilometer shear there. Long 0th or 6 kilometer shear. And let's see. Yeah, very limited instability. That's going to be a problem. So our forecast soundings, lifted parcels are going to look kind of like that. That gives us very little negative energy. So it looks like a very limited potential there for severe weather. All right, running this up into Thursday. Boy, that cold blast really drives through into the central U.S. So let's place those fronts. Everything is very fast moving. Yeah, that's how it looks to me right there. Kind of that high is not very strong. It's only 1022 millibars, but the breadth of that, the aerial breadth is just huge. And we can see quite a cold pool there, big 522 millibar or decameter high aloft over the Great Lakes. So looks like we'll be briefly back in the winter pattern. Let's look at a forecast skew-t there for Chicago. Yeah, it is going to be very cold aloft. See how low that tropopause is. All the way down to about 20,000 before we start seeing the upper level warming. So yeah, we're getting a little bit of another burst of winter there. And then the Pacific system is coming inland. It's already crossing into New Mexico, kind of interacting with that Canadian system there over the high plains. So we should see things start to get kind of windy and showery there in New Mexico and West Texas. And there's how things look for Friday night. Cold high covering most of the eastern and central U.S. Texas is right back in that upslope pattern. So we're going to have clouds once again from the I-35 corridor westward especially over West Texas there. And that Pacific low is coming inland. You can see it right there over Arizona. It is going to be carrying jet stream activity across that dome, across Texas there, so that's going to help to increase the clouds. However, any surface systems are likely going to go aloft as they cross over that dome there. And let's see how things look for the weekend. Going into Saturday, a little bit of elevated activity there in Texas. Looks like maybe the warm front trying to lift north. Let's see, how does that interact exactly? Yeah, I think that's the Pacific system kind of bulldozing in like that. The old front is kind of looking like that right there. Some very deep cyclogenesis there in Montana. And there's that Pacific high coming inland, 1036 millibars. So our attention shifts west instead of to the north. And snowstorm there in Montana for April. So we've got no shortage of stuff to look at here. So anyway, Pacific system comes in, sweeping into Texas right there. Ahead of that, along this jet stream that you can see in the thickness, see those red thickness lines, that kind of outlines the jet stream. That and the warm front there helping to get showers going over the Gulf Coast. That'll spread eastward. So we're just getting right back into that icebox pattern. That looks pretty good right there. Carolina's, yeah, it looks like a bit of a kind of a baroclinic system, kind of trucking eastward right there through the Carolinas. That's going to be Sunday. And then here comes that next bit of cold air for next week. Settles in over Texas, and there's another surge, and things start to look a little bit more quiet, but it's still going to be a cold month. 17th, 18th. Yeah, so we're not going to get back into a spring pattern until, good grief, there's another high. There's another high. Good God. Yeah, it's probably going to be May before things start to warm up. So anyway, that's how things look, and let's take a quick peek over there in Europe. So we're not going to go through all the charts, but we'll just kind of give you a quick look. Looks like it's dominated by a cold high pressure area. This is a big baroclinic high. Settled in over Germany right there, giving some easterly flow into the UK. And looks like the storm track is well to the north there, north of Scotland. And let's go forward a couple days. Yeah, quiet weather since the storm track is headed into Norway there. And then looks like a new Atlantic high coming in. So that'll kind of spread into Europe and keep things kind of fair into the weekend. And then things don't really start going downhill until, yeah, around Saturday. Looks like UK gets grazed by some of these Atlantic systems. And then there's another. This comes with a pretty good punch of cold air into the UK there. This is going to be Sunday morning. So Sunday should be kind of blustery there in England and Scotland, Wales, Ireland. And then that'll spread into France and Germany for Monday. All right, I think that's about all I got for today. Thanks for watching. And I hope you all are staying healthy. And we will see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.